Well, welcome to the Banter. My name's Lucas, and I'm here with Greg. How's it going, Greg?
Doing great.
Good.
How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, this is like a highlight of my week doing the Banter. There's always technical things happening behind the screen, that no one else can see but me. But it's been a bit funny this morning, as always. But I'm so excited to spend time talking about the stuff that we're talking about on Sunday and just going a little deeper and everything like that. So I'm really excited. If you are
Me
here
too.
with us watching live, welcome to the stream. If you are watching after on YouTube or Facebook, it's great to have you here. And if you are listening to the podcast, I hope that our voices are soothing and challenging as you kind of work through this material as well. Yeah. How's your week been, Greg?
It's been good. I'm still in the mode of kind of finishing up stuff around the house. We've been in for a month now, which is hard to believe. That's been great. Most of the things have been ticked off the list, which is great. We're still waiting for a fridge. Fridge is supposed to come on Thursday. I'm going to really miss my daily or every second day trip to the store for ice for the cooler.
Oh my word, yeah.
That's what we've been doing.
A whole month for the fridge, that's tough.
Yeah, it's been fun. Fun. Yeah. But it's all been good. How about you? How's your week? You've got Grayson at home doing homeschool this week for the next while. How's that all going?
Yeah. Lockdown 4. Is it 4? Number 4?
Something like that.
3 or 4. So yeah, Grayson, we started him in junior kindergarten. We actually had a choice. Like we could have kept him home for another whole year and put him in second year of kindergarten, but we put him in the first year thinking that it'd be like the most amazing thing. He'd go to school every day and it'd be awesome. But we've had to navigate all the social distancing stuff with school, and then like just everything to do with COVID is really complicated. And now that we're in another lockdown, he's at home. So it's kind of weird. Like you don't want your kid to just be staring at a screen all the time. Like that's not good I don't think that's great for their little brains. And yet his schooling, I don't have the capacity to be teaching him French and all that stuff. So it's important to us that we partner with his school board to teach him like that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of weird placing him in front of a screen and he's interacting with his other little friends at school and stuff. But it's actually funny because yesterday the teachers took off to kind of plan out the next few weeks. And then today he had a dentist appointment. So he hasn't actually done school this week. But tomorrow, or maybe later today or tomorrow, he'll start. And yeah, he doesn't mind it. He just puts his headphones on and we give him a snack and he does the little artwork and material stuff, whatever they bring him. And it's pretty amazing. It's really amazing watching a child go through the earliest years of learning because they learn so quickly. Like he can speak French like almost better than I can, and I went all the way up to grade 11.
Yep. We know how to conjugate verbs.
Yeah, exactly. I can do some of the like textbook stuff, but he can, he just knows his little words and stuff, and it's super cute. So
cool.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. It's a great example of what we are kind of digging into right now with this whole series on becoming a contender. Kids when they're young, they just have this. They're like sponges, right? They just want to learn. They want to grow. They want to know.
Oh, he loves it. He loves learning so much. Yeah.
And it's something that I never want to lose. I've still got some of that hunger, and I don't want to stop. I want to keep learning. The opportunities that we have are just immense. And the minute we stop learning, I would say is the minute where we start heading down the path toward irrelevance.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I remember we did some like strengths assessments with the board at Brookside a few years ago now, actually. And there was a couple of, you included, and I think Ken, Allison, uh, who have this like real passion for ongoing learning.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just part of how God made you, and you've been able to use that over your years, like just a hunger for knowledge. And guys like you and Ken as well, like you could talk about anything, and you've probably read a book about it, or you've read some articles or done some thinking on it, and it's incredible. I was telling Grayson that Ken, he was a botanist, I believe. Uh, he's kind of like a Pratt brother, Chris and Martin
Yeah.
Pratt.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
knows all about the animals here in Canada, and I just think he's spent his whole life learning. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we can apply that to our spiritual walk as well, and that's so important. And this week was all about. So last week we talked about what it means to contend, and this past week we talked about contending for the faith and trying to figure out what is the faith.
Yeah.
Because if you don't really know what your core beliefs are, you can't really stand up for them. And
Yeah.
so we got some questions in about that. We got 3 questions. So we'll kind of try to speed through them a little bit, but spend a little bit of time on a couple of these. So at some point in this sermon, you talked about how textbooks aren't just reserved for seminary students, but that we should all be trying to study some theology so that we have a good understanding of God and man and Jesus, humanity, life and death and the world and all this stuff, so that we have a kind of core understanding of that. But I was curious. I mean, there's so many textbooks out there, and there's countless theologians. So how do we sift through their works and figure out which theologian is correct?
Nice, easy question. Simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a critical question though. And too often what we default to is I'll go with the one that I like. I like what they say. They agree with me, therefore I'll just stick with that. And that's even assuming that we've checked out a couple, right? I think it's important to think through, like, why is it I'm listening to these particular guys or not. I think it's important to recognize that every single theologian out there, just like every human being, like we all have a certain framework, we all have certain assumptions, we all have certain motives, we all have certain biases to say, oh, this guy is biased or this girl is biased. Well, of course they are. Like that, everybody is. That the idea of being totally unbiased is a fantasy. Like that, there's always that. The question to me is not are they, it's what are they? What are the biases? What are the assumptions? What are the motives? And a good theologian will tell you up front, these are my assumptions. This is where I'm coming from. This is what I believe, and this is how I'm interpreting what I'm interpreting. And if you take a look at some of those things, somebody who's coming from a perspective of, I believe the Bible is inspired. I believe this is God's word. They're going to have a totally different interpretation and totally different spin on something, as opposed to a theologian who says, actually, I think this is just the work of people. There's no, God's not really involved. Somebody who believes that the supernatural is possible, that a miracle can take place, is going to have a totally different interpretation than somebody who says they're impossible. Like if that's their starting point, they're going to interpret things really differently.
Mm-hmm.
So just having that kind of clear idea, it can be a lot of work to figure out some of those things. So ask a coach, ask a mentor, like ask somebody that you trust. Who are you reading? Like, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of this girl? What do you think of this book? To me, that's one of the best resources we have in each other as a body of brothers and sisters following Jesus. We have each other. Like, ask your life group. Talk it out there. Like those kind of things are super, super helpful. What have
Yeah.
you seen? What have you experienced?
The thing that comes to mind is, and I haven't read a ton of theology books, but I did go through a few years where I was always reading a theology book, and I was always incredibly fascinated that the preface of of a theology book takes up so much. And once you read, like, I think that just reading the beginning, the intro to the book, sometimes it's, 100, 200 pages long. Um, you get to
Just the
know,
intro.
yeah, just the preface. But you
Yeah.
get to understand the theologian and where they're coming from as a person, and then they get into what they believe and how they are ascertaining what they believe. So I always just thought, like, the very first thing I would ever do before the assigned readings was just really carefully try to understand who they are as a person, what version of the Bible they were using, where they lived in the world, what time of the, like, what decade they lived, like that kind of stuff. Just a really holistic picture of who they were as a person, who their colleagues were. Often, like most often, theologians will interact with each other in within their own textbooks, and they'll usually give a good example of what they intend you to get out of their text. And so I just, like, I know it sounds boring, and every time I'm reading it, I'm like, this. A lot of this is just technical stuff, but they're setting up what they want you to get out of the book, and a lot of times you could really pretty easily figure out whether you would line up with them just based off their life story, who else they're working alongside, or who they're arguing against or for, and so it does seem a bit more technical, but I've always found it really life giving to read that side of it as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's so much that you can gain from that, and one of the things that I would probably add to that is that in pretty much every Christian community, whether it's a church family like ours, or whether it's kind of a denominational expression or something like that, there's typically a number of theologians and theological texts that have been kind of vetted, and it's like these are, it's not the sum and total, but like if you're wanting to dig in and you're wondering where to start, here's a good place to start.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned Erickson, which is a
yeah,
great one. It's
yeah,
probably the older uh, kind of core for a lot of Baptists, and
yeah,
then Grudem
Grudem.
is a newer one, I think the 80s or 90s, who would have either worked off of some of Erickson's or kind of supplemental to his stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
And was it
yeah,
all of my professors and a lot of the folks in our denomination in the fellowship would turn to those voices for a lot of their theology.
yeah. And guys like D.A. Carson, who's actually affiliated with our movement, pretty much, like, I'll tell people anything written by D.A. Carson's worth reading.
Right.
J.I. Packer, like there's guys out there, F.F. Bruce, like there's guys out there that it's like if they read it, it's probably worth reading, even if you
Right.
don't end up agreeing with everything. Anytime I read something that they've written and I don't agree, I question my interpretation. Like it's like, if these guys, just because of their stature and their experience, if they are coming to a different conclusion than I am, I still may be right, but I want to find out why. Like I want to dig into that and see, because perhaps I'm the one who needs to do some shaping of my beliefs.
Yeah. That kind of ties into our second question. Like, the basic question would be, why do I need to read anything except for the Bible? Because all these guys, like, they're just reading the Bible. Like, don't I have what it takes? And then to just understand the Bible from within, like just only reading the Bible, nothing else supplemental. And sometimes I think people are afraid that they don't have what it takes to understand the deeper stuff that might be introduced in a theological work. So they just want to read only the Bible and nothing else. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Let's start with that. The second question first, and jump back into the previous. I think if our approach, our perspective is, I'm just going to read the Bible because I'm trying to avoid the heavy stuff or the deep stuff. Like, good luck with that. So, we're fooling ourselves if we think that we can avoid deep stuff by just reading the Bible. Like almost all of those books, if they're written well, they're trying to help us understand the deep stuff that you find as you're reading through the Bible. So
Right. Yeah,
either
they're not
we read
introducing
it.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just helping explain. So it's uh, you read through a passage of the Bible, and you either go, I don't have a clue what that means, and I'm not going to worry about it, or we say, I want to know. And how do you learn? One of the best ways to learn is to uh, basically tap the shoulder of somebody who's done the research, done the digging, knows the original languages, knows the context better, and say, hey, how do you understand this? And when we're reading a book, that's really what we're doing. I often think of, that if you are like a musician or an athlete, or even just doing your job, and there's like people that are at the top of that game, stellar musicians or athletes, like to be able to sit down with them and say, hey, how did you get where you're going, and all that kind of thing is massive. Like we jump at those opportunities. And really reading a book is kind of like a form of sitting down and having a coffee with them and saying, help me understand what you've learned. Except you can shut the book and basically shut them up, go do what you need to do, come back, pick it up, and they carry on the conversation at your convenience, which is sweet. So I think it's really valuable to understand kind of the interplay that the Word of God does speak, and we need to be hearing the Word. We need to be in the Word. But a lot of us, we have trouble hearing it. We have trouble understanding, just because of the context and because of the historicity of it. A lot of the writings in the Bible were written to particular people in particular situation, particular time, for a particular purpose. If you don't understand those things, it's easy to misapply. Or it's, one of the most dangerous things, I think, is to just kind of, I'm just going to open the Bible and I'll read this verse and I'll try to apply it to my life. And it's like, you read the verse and it's like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Or if you read 3 verses previous, you'll see it saying, here's a bunch of things not to do. And then, it's just so easy for us to misunderstand.
Yeah. And so the people who like have written these books and or courses online or videos or just all those other voices, even our local pastor, like they are kind of more immersed in the whole field of biblical study, and so they can call to mind more of the, again, like you said, the historicity, the context, which for a lot of us it's just harder to call to mind all of that. So it's that, and I think that's true. Like that's why we have supplemental readings or devotions or anything else, because we kind of need someone to guide us as we grow deeper in our understanding of God and the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of what comes to my mind is somebody learning how to do surgery. They're under the oversight of a seasoned surgeon, who at first they're basically just shut up and watch, and gradually they learn to take more of a role as they learn, as they see. But there's that mentoring process that's going on, and it's such a valuable thing.
Yeah, and in a medical world, like the residency of a doctor is like years and years long, and
Yeah.
like it's like painstaking, and it's like 24 hours a day, and they just go through so much. But then they come out, and we have our family physician who we trust with our lives,
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
surgeon who you trust with your, like you actually trust with your life.
Yeah. What's interesting, the residency doesn't even begin until after years of study. Like they've learned a whole ton of information, but then now they're learning how to use it, how to apply it. And both of those are, actually those are the 2 big chunks that we're looking at in this series. Today's one is on the learning piece. Next week, we're going to be looking on the applying piece, but so important.
So the next question might actually work a little bit better for next week, but maybe we could just kind of get the tip of the iceberg on how do we contend for the faith with those who are hostile to the gospel, which A lot of that would need unpacking.
Yeah.
How do we share our faith with people who are really against Christianity or something like that? And we might get into this next week. This was a question that came in a little bit later. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. This is one that we can spend an awful lot of time for an awful long period of weeks to
right,
unpack. Because, like you
yeah,
say, each, what put together a frame of reference for the circumstances, for the kind of person, all that kind of thing. So let's maybe just hit a couple general
yeah,
things that hopefully are valid in pretty much any situation.
okay,
Two things that come to mind for me, and then love to hear what your thoughts are on this as well. First one is, how do we contend for faith with people who are hostile to Christianity with love and grace? Like, just show them love, show them grace. Like that the old golden rule of treat others the way you'd want to be treated yourself applies in spades in this. Like, show them compassion, show them, like, don't treat them like they're boneheads, like, respect them as you share, assuming that they'll even give you an opportunity to share. Like, often it's like, just love them, show them the grace of Jesus, bless them in whatever way you can, ask questions, share experiences, do what you can to try and create thirst. Because if you're trying to shove it down somebody's throat who's not interested, yeah, it's not going to work. So, like, that's to me, that's one of the big ones. And the second one, I'll just mention real quick, and then I want to hear what your thoughts are. Is be humble, and yet confident. A humble confidence, humble in yourself, confident in God. Trust that He knows what He's doing, and that His word is reliable, even when other people are resisting or poking holes and everything else. Trust Him that in His time, in His way, He's going to move. And our role is not really to convince anybody. Not too many people actually get converted through a debate. It's like, we're gonna have this big argument, and screaming and yelling, and at the end they go, "Oh, you're right, I submit." It's very rare.
I think that I totally agree. I think we need to have confidence in Christ and His work, and the experience of coming to Him in personal faith is really, really important. But when I hear this, and this question comes up pretty often in different circles, but like, from my perspective, I think a lot of people are hostile to Christians more than they're hostile to the gospel.
Yeah.
And they're hostile to the church and how they've maybe been hurt by people in the church or the organized religion of their upbringing or something like that. And I really believe that people are often kind of in that space more than they are hostile to the actual truth about who Jesus is. Unless, of course, they have been, like, their hearts have been spiritually hardened toward the truth of God, which is really difficult for a person to even comprehend that. Like, for me, and I think we can really know that. So I think that it comes back to just showing love and sharing my experience with the gospel, and hoping for questions, and just being open, as honest as I can. But I really think that a lot of this comes down to the conversation often is shut down because they have been hurt by people or hurt by the church. And I mean, I can think of tons of examples of people in my personal life, like in my very close, even in my family, who have been hurt by people or the church or leadership. And so maybe they're not hostile to the concept of Christianity or even to the good grace of God, but they're hostile to individual people. And so the more we can do to paint a good picture for Christians and to stand for God's love and to show His grace and mercy to our friends and family, like, I just think that's super, super important.
Yeah, helping people distinguish the two, that the way people treat them is different than the way God treats them, that
Yeah.
what they may have experienced in a particular setting called a church does not necessarily mean that was what God was wanting for them,
Right.
is huge. And for a lot of people, they just assume that they're both the same thing, right?
Yeah.
The more we can show love and grace and trying to add in the right questions at the right time to help them start to consider,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if somebody's hurting, you just hold their hand. Maybe not, not actually, but just show them grace, show them love. Like
Yeah.
yeah. It's so good.
So good. This is great, and I'm sure we're going to keep talking more and more about that. I feel like we're literally just scratching the surface of what it means to contend for our faith, especially once we have a good understanding of what that faith is. How do we share it? So that's probably going to come up. I have a good feeling about that.
Yeah. This is such an important thing, and it's funny that it needs to be highlighted. But when you start reading the scriptures, looking for it, it's like it's everywhere. Like the call, the encouragement, the hopefully inspiration. You know what? Contend for your faith. Set out. Strengthen the weak knees. All this kind of thing. Like it's constantly there because we are so prone to not do it. Spiritually speaking, I have this big streak in me that wants to just sit and eat Cheetos and complain about how unfit I am. And there's so much that we can do to grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I just want to remind the people who are listening or watching that we would love to hear your questions about all of the content that we have on Sunday mornings that we release as part of our worship services. So make sure to email those in to banter@mybrookside.church or text us at 519-613-9400. And we'll be back at it next week for another episode of The Banter. But for now, we will see you in the next episode.
Have a great week. See you later.